When we look back at the titanic struggle of the Second World War, our minds immediately drift to the giants of the battlefield. We think of the heavy armor of the Tiger tank, the screaming dive of the Stuka, or the industrial might of the Liberty ships. But beneath the treads of the tanks and the shadow of the bombers, the war was often fought on a much more personal, fragile scale. For the dispatch rider carrying orders that could save a battalion, or the paratrooper dropping behind enemy lines with nothing but a carbine and a folding scooter, survival didn't depend on inches of armor plate. It depended on speed, balance, and two wheels. From the precision-machined steel of the German BMWs designed to conquer the Russian mud, to the crude but unbreakable American that became the symbol of liberation, motorcycles were the nervous system of modern warfare. They were the first vehicles into the burning towns of Normandy and the last vehicles out of the crumbling ruins of Berlin. Some were mechanical masterpieces, featuring two-wheel drive and reverse gears. Others were little more than motorized bicycles held together by hope and welding flux, but every single one of them played a part in the greatest conflict in human history. In this video, we are opening the garage doors to inspect the full inventory of the global conflict. We will analyze the engineering, the flaws, and the combat history of the two-wheeled warriors. This is USGI Archives, and today we break down every motorcycle used in World War II. The core breakdown. United States, the arsenal of democracy. Let's begin with the United States. While American industry is famous for its tanks and trucks, its contribution to motorcycle warfare was equally massive. 1 WLA, the Liberator. We start with the icon, the WLA. Based on the civilian WL model, the A stood for Army. This 45 cubic inch 740 V-twin was the workhorse of the U.S. military. Over 90,000 were produced. It wasn't the fastest bike in the war, topping out around 65 miles per hour, but it was low compression and could run on the quality gasoline. Visually, it was distinct. Olive drab paint, a heavy leather scabbard for a gun mounted on the forks, and blackout lights for night convoys. To the soldiers who rode it and the towns they freed, it earned its nickname, the Liberator. 2 WLC. Crossing the border to the north, we have the WLC. This was the variation built specifically for the Canadian Army and Commonwealth forces. While mechanically similar to the WLA, the WLC moved the clutch lever to the right side of the handlebar and the throttle to the left, an idiosyncrasy of British logic. It also featured interchangeable wheels, simplifying logistics in the field. 3XA Experimental Army. Next is a rare beast born of jealousy. The U.S. Army looked at the German BMWs tearing up the North African desert and realized their chain-driven were getting chewed up by the sand. The result was the XA. This was a radical departure for it, the German BMW R75 almost part for part. It featured a flat twin-boxer engine and, crucially, a shaft drive instead of a chain. This enclosed system was impervious to sand. Only about 1,000 were made before the Jeep rendered them obsolete, making them a holy grail for collectors today. 4 UA. Before the WLA became standard, there was the UA. This was an adaptation of the heavy civilian big twin models, packing a massive 74 cubic inch 1200 engine. It was a behemoth. Because of its sheer weight and size, it wasn't suited for frontline scouting. Instead, it was relegated to shore patrol and military police duties, often hooked up to a heavy sidecar to drag disabled vehicles or prisoners. 5 Indian 741B. The great rival to was Indian. The 741B was their primary contribution to the war effort. It was a lighter, smaller machine with a 30.5 cubic inch 500 V-twin engine. While it was reliable and easier for smaller soldiers to handle, it suffered from a lack of raw power compared to the WLA. Many were shipped to Allied nations like Britain and the Soviet Union via Lend-Lease, where they were ridden until the wheels fell off. 6. Indian 640B. Designed to fix the power issue, the 640B was the military version of the legendary Indian Sport Scout. It was robust, faster, and arguably a better motorcycle than the WLA. However, it arrived late in the game. By the time it was ready, the U.S. military had already standardized on the parts chain. As a result, only a few thousand saw service. 7. Indian 841. Much like the XA, the Indian 841 was a direct response to the German BMW, but Indian took a different approach. They mounted a V-twin engine longitudinally, sideways, so the cylinders stuck out into the wind for cooling, similar to a modern. It used a shaft drive and was a mechanical marvel, but like the XA, the arrival of the Willys Jeep killed the project. 8. Model 53 Airborne. Now for something completely different. The Model 53. This wasn't a motorcycle, it was a weapon of vertical envelopment. Designed for the Airborne, this tiny boxy scooter had no suspension and tiny tires. It was designed to fit into a specialized parachute crate. When a paratrooper hit the ground, he could unpack this 250-pound scooter and scoot away at 40 miles per hour. It was affectionately nicknamed the 9 Simplex Cycle. Finally for the U.S., the Simplex. This looked like a bicycle with an engine. It was an ultra-lightweight, low-speed machine used primarily on air bases in the States for messengers. It was never meant for combat, but it kept the flow of paperwork moving so the heavy machinery could fight. Germany, precision and complexity. Moving to the other side of the line, the German Wehrmacht relied on motorcycles more than any other army. For the Blitzkrieg, speed was life. 10. BMW R75. The king of the German fleet. The BMW R75 is perhaps the most advanced military motorcycle ever built. It was a heavy sidecar combination powered by a 750 boxer engine. Its secret weapon, a locking differential that sent power to both the rear wheel and the sidecar wheel. It could climb a 45-degree muddy bank and tow a light anti-tank gun. It was a masterpiece of over-engineering. 11. BMW R12. Before the R75, there was the R12. This was the most common heavy motorcycle in the Wehrmacht during the early war. It featured a pressed steel frame and was the first motorcycle in the world to use hydraulically damped telescopic forks. While it lacked the driven sidecar wheel of the R75, it was a rugged workhorse that froze in Russia and boiled in Africa alongside its crews. 12. BMW R71. The R71 was a pre-war design that became a ghost. It was a 750-side valve machine. While it saw service, its true legacy is that the Soviet Union secretly acquired the plans and molds for this bike to create their own M72. The enemy was literally riding the same bike. 13. K750. The arch-rival to BMW. The K750 was built to the same heavy specifications as the BMW R75, featuring shaft drive, a driven sidecar wheel, and a reverse gear. Many German soldiers actually preferred the for its lower center of gravity and immense torque. It was a tractor on 3 wheels, capable of dragging artillery through the spring thaw. 14. K600. The Green Elephant. This was a 600 overhead valve boxer twin. It was faster than the heavy tractors, often used for solo courier duties or by officers who needed to move between command posts rapidly. Its distinctive pressed steel frame gave it a sleek, modern look for the 1940s. 15. K800. A rare luxury. The K800 featured a horizontally opposed 4-cylinder engine, a flat 4. It was smooth, quiet, and powerful. However, the rear cylinders had a tendency to overheat in the slow grind of combat traffic, making it less popular on the front lines than the simpler twins. 16. NSU HK101. Is it a tank? Is it a bike? It is the. This is one of the strangest vehicles of the war. It featured a motorcycle front end with handlebars, but the rear was a tracked chassis powered by a car engine. It was designed for the paratroopers to be dropped by glider. It was the only vehicle that could navigate the deepest Russian mud. Late in the war, it was even used to tow Mi-262 jets to the runway to save aviation fuel. 17. DKW NZ350. Not everything was a heavy boxer. The DKW NZ350 was a two-stroke single-cylinder machine. It was light, smoky, and simple. Because it had fewer moving parts, it was incredibly reliable in the freezing cold. On the Eastern Front, where complex valves froze shut, the simple ring-ding-ding of the DKW was a sound of survival. 18. DKW RT125. The baby of the bunch. This 125 two-stroke was so brilliant in its simplicity that after the war, the Allies stole the design. The U.S. turned it into the Hummer, the British made the BSA Bantam, and the Russians made the Minsk. It is arguably the most motorcycle design in history.